Please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I got to the cafe early. I always do that on first dates. It helps me calm down, get used to the place before it gets awkward. It was one of those small, artsy coffee shops that tried too hard to look old. Exposed brick walls, yellow lights that made everything look warmer than it really was. There were only a few people inside. A couple by the window, a guy on his laptop, and a girl reading at the counter. Nothing unusual. I found a table near the middle, facing the door, and sent her a quick message. I'm here. Her name was Tessa. We'd been talking for 2 weeks, mostly at night. She was funny quick with sarcasm, and had this habit of sending random photos of things she saw during her day. Street signs, coffee cups, or cat. It made her feel real in a way people online don't always feel. I waited. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. Me too. I looked up, scanning the room. No one walked in. The couple by the window was still deep in conversation. The girl at the counter hadn't moved. I frowned and texted again, asking where she was sitting. No reply. A few minutes went by. I ordered a coffee to look less awkward. My phone buzzed again. Another message. It was a photo. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my chest tightened. It was me, sitting at that table. Same jacket, same posture, same cup of coffee I just ordered. The picture was taken from across the street, through the big front window of the cafe. I looked out immediately, heart pounding, scanning the glass for anyone with a phone up. There were a few people walking by. A man in a gray hoodie, 2 girls carrying shopping bags, an old woman with a dog, but no one looking in my direction, no one standing still. I typed a message asking if she was outside, but before I could hit send, another text came through. You look nervous. The words hit me in a way I didn't expect. My hands felt clammy. I turned my head slowly toward the window again, trying to see if anyone was watching me. There was a car parked across the street, dark blue, windows tinted. Someone could have been in there, but I couldn't see a face. I told myself it was fine. Maybe she was just messing with me. Maybe it was some weird joke. I replied that I didn't see her. No response. Minutes dragged. The coffee went cold. The air felt heavier somehow, like the warmth from the lights had turned stale. I kept looking at my phone, waiting for the next buzz. When it came, I almost dropped it. Another photo. This time it was closer, the angle slightly tilted, like whoever took it had moved nearer to the window. I could see the detail on my jacket, the reflection of the hanging lights behind me. And in that reflection, I saw something else. A shape. A person standing behind the photographer. Or maybe it was the photographer. I couldn't tell. Just a vague, dark outline in the glass. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked to the counter. I told the barista I was meeting someone but couldn't find them, asked if anyone had been taking pictures outside. She looked confused, said she hadn't noticed. I went to the door and stepped outside. The cold hit immediately, sharp and real. The street was quiet now, only a few cars passing. I looked around, scanning for someone holding a phone, anyone who seemed out of place. Nothing. I texted her again, trying to sound calm. Where are you? Seconds later, a reply, right here. I turned in a slow circle, my stomach twisting. There was no one. The cafe behind me looked normal, people talking, music playing, no one paying attention. Then my phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time it was from behind me, my back, my head turned slightly, the glow of my phone screen lighting my hands. The picture was so recent it felt impossible. I spun around, but the street was empty. The only sound was a car turning at the corner and the wind pushing through a pile of leaves near the curb. I went back inside, my pulse hammering. The barista gave me a weird look but didn't say anything. I sat down again, pretending to scroll through my phone like nothing was happening. After a few minutes, another message came. You're cute when you're scared. That was it. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out again, fast this time. I didn't care if she saw me leave. I just needed to get out of there. The night air felt colder now, almost biting. I walked a few blocks, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. Every time a car slowed down, my stomach dropped. Every window I passed felt like it was hiding eyes. When I finally got to my car, my hands were shaking. I got inside, locked the doors, and just sat there for a minute, breathing hard. Then my phone buzzed one last time. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was a short message, drive safe. Underneath it, another photo. It was me again, sitting in my car, hand on the steering wheel, taken from the sidewalk, through the driver's window. I started the engine and drove without thinking, just trying to get distance. The whole way home, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting headlights to follow me. When I finally got home, I turned off my phone completely. I tossed it on the couch and didn't touch it until morning. When I turned it back on, the messages were gone. All of them. The number she used to text me had been deleted from my contacts somehow. The entire chat history had vanished like it never existed. I went online to check her profile, the one from the app. Gone too. The account had been deleted overnight. No trace of her name, no photos, nothing. I even checked my own social media to see if anything strange had happened, but everything looked the same. Except for one thing. When I opened my gallery, there was a new photo I hadn't taken. It was dark, grainy, just my apartment window, taken from outside. You could see me faintly in the reflection, sitting on the couch, holding my phone. The timestamp was from 3 hours ago. I don't go to cafes anymore. It started off so normal that I almost forgot it was a first date. He was one of those people who texted just enough to stay interesting without feeling clingy. His name was Drew. We'd been talking for about a week. Nothing too deep, mostly jokes, memes, little stories about work. He seemed smart, funny in a dry way, and a little awkward, which I actually liked. He suggested we meet at this little cafe near the park, the kind that tries to look vintage with mismatched chairs and old postcards on the walls. It was busy enough to feel comfortable, but quiet enough to actually talk. I got there first, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window. When he walked in, I recognized him immediately, same smile, same messy hair from his photos. He seemed nervous, which put me at ease. He asked how I'd been, complimented my outfit, and started talking about the weather like everyone does at the start of small talk. I remember thinking he was easy to be around. But it didn't take long before things started to feel off. At first, it was subtle. Whenever I said something, he'd agree, not just in a polite way, but with the exact same phrasing. If I said I liked the atmosphere, he repeated almost word for word, same rhythm, same tone. When I joked about how loud the espresso machine was, he laughed at the same time I did, the same pitch, like an echo that came half a second too late. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just nervous and trying too hard to match my energy. But the more I talked, the weirder it got. Everything I liked, he liked. Every opinion I had, he had too. If I said I didn't like something, he'd suddenly hate it too. It wasn't just agreeing. It was mirroring. When I leaned on my hand, he did it too. When I took a sip from my cup, he mirrored it perfectly. It got to the point where I almost wanted to test it. So I casually switched which hand I was using, and he hesitated before doing the same. That's when I started to get uneasy. The conversation felt wrong, like I was talking to a version of myself. I laughed it off and made a joke about how he was copying me, but instead of laughing back, he tilted his head slightly and stared at me for a few seconds too long. His smile didn't change. Then, in a quiet voice, he said something that made my skin crawl. He said he just wanted to be exactly what I wanted. It wasn't what he said, it was the way he said it. Calm, serious, like it wasn't a joke, like he'd been thinking it the whole time. The silence after that felt heavy. I tried to change the topic, but everything after that moment felt forced. I finished my drink faster than I meant to, told him I had to get up early the next day, and thanked him for meeting up. He offered to walk me home, but I said no, pretending I was meeting a friend. He smiled and nodded like he already knew that was coming. When I walked away, I could feel him watching me through the window. I didn't turn around, but I knew he was still sitting there, still smiling that calm smile. At home, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I was just overthinking. Maybe he was socially awkward and didn't know how to act. I told myself I'd just let the conversation fade naturally and move on. Then, a few hours later, I got a follow request. The username was strange. It was my name. My exact name. First and last. The profile photo was my face. Not just a random selfie either. It was one I'd taken last week and posted only on my story. It had expired days ago. My stomach dropped. I clicked the profile. There were already posts, photos of me, ones I recognized, but the captions were wrong. The bio said things I'd never write. One post had my picture with a caption that said something about finally finding him. I went through every photo, and they were all from my own account. Same images, same filters, but posted hours ago, not by me. Every comment under them was from fake accounts, all saying the same thing. How perfect we looked together. The only difference was that some of the pictures had been edited. Little things, subtle things. My smile looked wider in some. In one photo, there was a shadow behind me that hadn't been there before. A tall, blurry shape that almost looked like someone standing too close. I felt cold all over. I scrolled down to see the first post on the page. It was a photo of the cafe from earlier that night, me sitting at the table looking out the window. The caption said, "She doesn't know yet." I deleted the app off my phone immediately and sat in silence, staring at my reflection in the black screen. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my phone twice. I kept telling myself it had to be a prank. He couldn't have gotten those pictures so fast. He couldn't have made that account in just a few hours. But then I remembered the way he watched me, how his eyes followed every move. How he mirrored every small thing I did like he was studying me, memorizing me. I tried calling the cafe, hoping maybe they had cameras. Maybe someone else noticed him being strange. The person on the phone said there was no one by that name on the reservation list. I checked my messages on the app we'd used, and his profile was gone, deleted completely, like he'd never existed. By the next morning, the fake account with my name was private. Then by evening, it was gone too. I didn't hear from him again, but every few days since, I get random notifications, new accounts with my name, slight variations, no profile picture. Sometimes they follow me, sometimes they just view my stories. Once, one of them messaged me, just one sentence. I think I'm getting better at it. I blocked it immediately, but I can't stop thinking about what that means. Sometimes, when I look at my own posts, I start to doubt if I was the one who uploaded them. The captions sound like me. The photos look like me. But something about them feels off, like someone copied my words and pasted them back wrong. It's been weeks now, and I still don't know what he wanted or how he did it, but I've stopped posting online completely. I deleted my accounts, changed my number, even switched apartments. Still, every once in a while, I'll be tagged in a photo that's not mine. It's always the same setting, that cafe window, and always from an account that disappears right after. In every picture, I'm sitting there again and smiling faintly, my head tilted just slightly to the side. And across from me, there's always a reflection. Someone sitting in the same position, smiling the same way. It was one of those nights that felt too normal to ever become something you'd remember. I wasn't expecting much. We'd matched on an app, talked for maybe a week, nothing deep. Just jokes, memes, little back and forths that felt easy. Her name was Mira. She had a calm, almost quiet vibe in her photos, the kind that makes you curious but not nervous. We picked a small Italian restaurant halfway between our neighborhoods. Nothing fancy, just warm lighting, wood tables, the kind of place people go when they're still trying to impress each other, but don't want to seem like they're trying too hard. I got there first. She was 5 minutes late, but when she walked in, I forgot about it immediately. She looked different than her photos. Not worse, just more real. Her hair was tied back, her makeup was barely there, and she smiled like she already knew something I didn't. From the start, she was easy to talk to. Not chatty, but good at keeping things flowing. She asked a lot of questions about my work, where I grew up, if I still lived in the same area. I didn't think anything of it. People ask that kind of stuff all the time. Halfway through dinner, it felt almost too normal. She laughed at my bad jokes, told a few stories about weird coworkers, even teased me for still using an iPhone with a home button. There was this strange comfort between us, like we'd known each other before, but couldn't place where. Then she excused herself to go to the bathroom. It wasn't anything dramatic. She stood up, smiled, said she'd be right back. I nodded, took a sip of my drink, scrolled through my messages. A few minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The waiter came by to ask if everything was okay. I said yeah. She just stepped away. He nodded politely but glanced toward the bathrooms. I could tell he thought it was weird too. After 20 minutes, I started getting this uncomfortable feeling in my stomach. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Her purse was still on her chair. That's what really threw me off. No one leaves their purse behind unless they're coming back. I gave it another 5 minutes before standing up and walking toward the bathrooms myself. The hallway was empty. I even pushed the door open a little, called her name softly, but no one answered. When I went back to the table, the waiter was standing there holding a folded check. He looked uneasy, like he didn't want to hand it to me. He said she'd left it for me. I sat down, trying to process that. She'd left. Without saying goodbye, without her purse. The waiter placed it on the table gently, then set her purse beside it. He didn't linger, just gave me a small nod and walked away. For a minute, I didn't touch anything. The restaurant noise felt louder somehow. The clinking glasses, low chatter, the sound of a knife scraping a plate. I just sat there staring at her bag. Eventually, I reached for it. It was heavier than I expected. Inside was the usual stuff: wallet, keys, a lipstick, a few receipts. Then I noticed a small folded paper wedged in the side pocket. It had my full name on it. My full name. Not the nickname I used on the app, not my shortened version. The real one, the one I don't even put on social media. I had unfolded it slowly, my fingers shaking a little. It wasn't long. Just a single sentence written in small, tidy handwriting. You shouldn't have come here. That was it. No explanation, no signature, nothing. My mouth went dry. I looked around the restaurant, scanning every face. Nobody seemed to be paying attention. Everything looked normal, too normal. I checked the purse again. In her wallet there was the ID. Same name, same face. It didn't look fake. But something about it still felt wrong. The photo was off, maybe too new, like it had been printed yesterday. My heart was pounding now. I pushed back my chair, ready to find someone, the waiter, the manager, anyone, but my body froze when I glanced out the window. Across the street, parked under a flickering streetlight, was a dark car. The kind of car you can't identify right away. The headlights weren't on, but I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. I don't know why, but I felt certain it was her. I couldn't see the face clearly, just the outline of a head, unmoving, facing the restaurant. I blinked, and for a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Then the car engine started. The headlights flashed on, and it pulled away slowly, disappearing into the street. I sat there for a long time after that. Long enough for the waiter to come back and ask if I was okay. I didn't know what to say. I just handed him some cash, told him to keep the change, and left the purse behind. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder. The street was almost empty. I walked fast, hands in my pockets, my mind spinning. I couldn't stop thinking about how she knew my full name. I hadn't given it to her. I checked the app earlier that day. It only had my first name, and it never mentioned my address. But the way she asked questions earlier suddenly felt different now, like she was confirming details she already knew. When I got home, I locked the door and sat on the couch, trying to make sense of it. My phone buzzed once. A new message notification from the dating app. It was from her profile. But when I opened it, the account was gone. Deleted. The chat history too. Just vanished. I checked my call history, my texts, my email, nothing from her. Nothing that could trace back. I even searched her name online, but there was nothing. No social media, no photos, no record of her anywhere. For days after, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside my apartment while I was gone. Nothing was missing, but things felt slightly moved. A cup turned the wrong way, my blinds pulled higher than I left them. A week later, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photo, a grainy picture of me sitting in that same restaurant looking at her empty chair. On the back, written in the same neat handwriting as before, were 5 words. I told you to leave. That's when I stopped using dating apps for good.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I wasn't even supposed to go out that night. I'd just finished a long week at work and wanted to stay in, but my friend kept saying I needed to get back out there. She even set me up with this guy she knew from her gym. Said he was nice, polite, a little quiet, but genuine. I gave in mostly to shut her up. His name was Tyler. He looked normal enough in his pictures. Smiled, dressed well, didn't seem sketchy. He suggested a bar downtown, one I'd been to before. I figured it was safe. Familiar, public, nothing weird. He was already there when I arrived. He waved me over with this easy grin and stood up to pull out my chair. At first, I thought he was kind of sweet, maybe a little too polite, but better that than awkward silence. The first half hour went fine. We talked about movies, music, travel, all the usual surface stuff. He was funny in a low-key way, the kind of person who doesn't talk much but says things that stick. I remember thinking how surprisingly comfortable it felt, how I wasn't checking the time or faking laughs. Somewhere between the second drink and the appetizers, I realized my phone was gone. It wasn't in my bag, not on the table, not in the bathroom where I'd gone earlier. I started panicking a little, patting my jacket pockets like it would just magically appear. He noticed right away, said we'd find it together. His voice was calm, reassuring, and he smiled like it wasn't a big deal. He got up and started checking under the table or on the bar stools, even asked the bartender if anyone turned in a phone. Everyone seemed nice about it, and he was extra helpful, even joking about how bad luck always strikes on first dates. It took a while, but we didn't find it. I told him it was fine, that I had to track it later from my laptop. He insisted on walking me home, saying it wasn't safe for me to go alone without a phone. He seemed genuinely concerned, and I didn't want to make it weird by refusing. The walk home wasn't long, maybe 10 minutes. The air was cool, the streets quiet except for the occasional car passing. We kept talking, but it felt different now, a little forced. Every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me. Not in a creepy way exactly, but too focused, like he was memorizing something. When we got to my building, he waited until I unlocked the door before saying good night. He smiled again, told me to message him once I got a new phone, and left. I remember thinking he was oddly calm for someone who just spent half the night helping me search for something that important. Inside, I sat on my couch for a while, trying to figure out how I could have lost it. I wasn't even that drunk. I replayed the whole night in my head, where I'd sat when I'd gone to the bathroom, what I'd done before noticing it was gone. Nothing stood out. It was like it had just disappeared. After showering, I grabbed my laptop and logged into iCloud to use the Find My feature. It said the phone was offline. Great. I checked again a few minutes later, but it didn't change. I was about to give up when I noticed the photo section had been updated. A new picture had synced. My stomach dropped. The photo was taken tonight. It showed me sitting at the bar, shoulders slightly turned, hair down, one hand resting on my drink. The lighting was warm and soft, the kind you only get from standing right behind someone. The angle made it clear it wasn't a selfie. It was taken from just a few feet away. From behind me. I stared at it for a long time, my mind trying to catch up. I zoomed in, hoping I'd see some clue, reflection, anything that made sense. You could just barely make out the mirror behind the bar, but the reflection was too blurred to see faces. I felt sick. It wasn't like I'd left my phone unattended for long. Maybe a few minutes when I went to the bathroom. But still, who would take someone's phone just to take that picture? I locked the device remotely, but the thought of someone having it, having that picture, made my hands shake. I told myself it could have been a glitch, maybe some weird thing the app did, but I knew that was impossible. I'd never taken that photo. The longer I looked, the more the details started to feel wrong. My hair wasn't positioned like that when I sat down. My drink looked full, but I'd already been sipping it by then, and the timestamp. It was taken an hour after we already started searching for the phone. Someone had it the whole time. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything. His calm tone, how he always smiled, how quick he was to help, how he offered to walk me home. I tried to convince myself he wasn't involved, but then I remembered something small, something I hadn't noticed until now. When I first sat down at the bar, he'd leaned forward to shake my hand, and for a second, his phone had been sitting right next to mine on the counter. Identical models. Same case, same color. At some point during the night, they must have gotten swapped. Except, no, that wasn't an accident. Because he was the one who suggested we move to the table after that. He was the one who picked up both phones. He handed me mine, or what I thought was mine, and said I could check the menu online. But when I reached for it, he said I didn't need to, that he'd already ordered something good. He'd been holding mine the whole time. I called the bar the next day, asked if anyone had found a lost phone. They said no. I asked if they had security cameras, and they said yes, but only near the entrance, not the seating area. By the afternoon, my phone location pinged once before disappearing again. It was on a side street near the river. I thought about going to check, but something in my gut told me not to. A few days later, I got a message from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. It was another picture of me, Same bar, same angle. Only this time I was laughing. The message had no words, no name, just that image. I deleted it immediately, blocked the number, turned off my laptop, and went to stay at my sister's place. It's been 2 weeks since then. I haven't heard from him, haven't seen him around. I keep thinking about the way he smiled that night, how calm he seemed even when I was panicking about my phone. Last night, I made the mistake of logging into iCloud again. There was a new photo, taken from outside my apartment window. Same angle, same distance, same silence. I didn't notice the photo right away. When I first stepped into her apartment, I was too busy pretending not to be nervous. It was our first date, technically, though we'd been talking for weeks. Her name was Alina. She had this confident energy that made people lean in when she talked. Every message she sent felt like it had a hidden meaning, so when she invited me over for dinner, I didn't hesitate. The apartment was small but spotless. Warm lighting, faint smell of vanilla, soft jazz playing low in the background. She moved around the kitchen like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Wine poured, candles lit, plates set out. Everything about her screamed control. I remember standing near the bookshelf trying to find something to calm down. She had neat rows of books arranged by color and framed photos scattered between them. A cap in one, a beach sunset in another. Then one caught my eye. It was a picture of her with a man. Their arms were around each other, smiling, the kind of smile that looked real. But what froze me wasn't her. It was him. He looked exactly like me. Same hair, same build, even the same slightly crooked smile I hated about myself. I thought maybe it was just one of those weird coincidences. People have lookalikes. It happens. But then my stomach twisted when I noticed something else, the watch. It wasn't just similar. It was identical to mine. The same silver band with a small scratch near the clasp. I remember that scratch because I'd done it the week I bought it, catching it on a railing. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there staring until she walked over with 2 glasses of wine. She followed my eyes, and her face didn't even twitch. She said it was her ex, someone who looked just like me. She laughed like it was funny, like it was nothing. I tried to laugh too, but it came out awkward. The rest of dinner was fine at first. She cooked pasta, poured more wine, asked questions about my job, my family, my hobbies. She was attentive, maybe too much. She remembered tiny things I'd mentioned once in a chat, the street I grew up on, the kind of music I liked, even my favorite brand of coffee. I told myself she probably just had a good memory. But then I noticed how she'd glance at me when I did small things, tapping my fingers on the table, fixing my sleeve, checking the time. She didn't look annoyed or curious. She looked expectant, like she was waiting for something familiar. After we ate, she suggested watching a movie. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay anymore, but she was so calm, so normal, that leaving suddenly felt strange. I told myself I was overreacting. We sat on our couch, lights dimmed. She picked an old movie, the kind that runs late on TV, black and white, slow, barely any sound except for static. Halfway through, she leaned her head against my shoulder. I froze for a second, but she felt warm, steady. My heart slowed a little. Then I saw it again. On the wall opposite the couch was a cluster of framed photos. Different moments, all casual. Friends at a picnic, a birthday party, her standing near a lake, and there he was again. The same guy from the first photo. The same face. Mine. In one picture, he was wearing the same jacket I was wearing right then, my navy one with the frayed cuff. My breath caught. I leaned forward slightly, pretending to stretch, and she smiled like she already knew what I'd seen. She said he'd left her suddenly years ago. No warning, no reason. I could feel her eyes on me when she said it, like she was comparing the way I sat, the way I breathed. She asked if I ever thought about disappearing. The way she said it didn't sound like a question. The air in the room started to feel heavier. I put my glass down on the coffee table and tried to think of an excuse to leave. She didn't seem bothered that I'd gone quiet. She reached over to refill my wine, her movements smooth, almost rehearsed. When she leaned forward, I noticed something else, a faint scar on her wrist, the same shape and place as one I had from when I fell off my bike as a kid. A small line, pale but obvious under the light. My throat went dry. I told her I should probably head home soon, but she didn't react. She kept staring at me, tilting her head slightly like she was memorizing my face. Then she said something that made my stomach twist, that I had the same nervous habits as he did. I asked what she meant. She said the way I tap my fingers when I think, the way I bite the inside of my cheek when I'm unsure, even the way I rest my thumb under my chin when I'm focused. I hadn't even realized I was doing any of that until she mentioned it. I forced my hand still and smiled weakly, saying maybe it was just coincidence. But she looked unconvinced. She asked if I'd ever been to her city before. I said no. She nodded slowly like she didn't believe me. Then she asked if I'd ever lost time, like big chunks of memory missing. Something in her voice made the hair on my neck stand up. I laughed it off, said I was fine. The silence after that felt long, too long. She stood up suddenly and said she wanted to show me something. I hesitated, but she'd already disappeared down the hall. I thought about leaving, just standing up and walking out, but curiosity kept me rooted. She came back holding a small wooden box. The lid creaked when she opened it, and inside were more photos. Not framed this time, just loose Polaroids stacked together. She handed me one. My breath caught again. It was him, or me, sitting at that same table we'd eaten dinner at earlier. Same angle, same lighting. Only the date scribbled at the bottom wasn't years ago. It was last month. I flipped through the rest quickly, my hands trembling. They were all the same man, sometimes alone, sometimes with her, sometimes asleep. I dropped them onto the table. She didn't flinch. She just watched me with that same calm, collected look. She said he used to get scared too. That was enough. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get it open. She didn't try to stop me. She just said quietly that she'd always known how to come back. I didn't look at her again. I just ran down the stairs and out onto the street. When I got home, I locked every door and sat on the edge of my bed until the sun came up. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number, a photo. It was me, standing in her apartment doorway looking nervous. The timestamp said tonight, 10 minutes before I'd arrived. I deleted it, but I can't stop thinking about that photo on her wall, the one she said was her ex, because the more I think about it, the less I'm sure that it was him. Maybe it really was me. I knew something was off the moment I walked in. The restaurant didn't even look like a real place, more like a picture someone had designed to look expensive. The walls were dark wood with dim golden lights that made the whole room glow. There was soft piano music coming from somewhere, but I couldn't see anyone playing. Every table had just two chairs, set perfectly opposite each other, and every person sitting at them seemed way too still. His name was Adrian. We'd been talking for about a month, mostly texting, sometimes calling. He was polite. Old school polite. He used full sentences and proper punctuation, which made him stand out. He said he liked quiet places, and that he booked somewhere special for our first date. I should have asked more questions, but I didn't. I was just tired of cheap diners and people who forgot my name halfway through dinner. When I got there, he was already waiting. He stood up when I approached and smiled, but didn't say a word, just nodded and gestured for me to sit. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed. I sat down and tried to break the silence, asked how long he'd been waiting, how his week was, normal stuff. But he didn't respond. He just kept smiling, his eyes fixed on me like he was studying every detail. His face didn't even twitch when I laughed nervously. At first, I thought maybe he was shy. Maybe he just didn't know what to say. But then the waiter appeared, tall, pale, expressionless, and handed me a menu without looking at either of us. I started flipping through it, but something felt wrong. None of the items had prices, and most didn't even have descriptions, just names. The first course, the second course, the final course. There weren't any drinks listed either. I looked up ready to ask about it, but the waiter was gone. I turned back to Adrian, and he was still staring. Not in a creepy way, or maybe exactly in a creepy way. His face was calm, but his eyes didn't move, not even when someone walked past our table. It was like I wasn't sitting across from a person, but a reflection that didn't know how to blink. I tried again to talk, just to fill the silence, but he didn't answer. His lips stayed pressed together, that same faint smile frozen in place. I glanced around the restaurant, hoping someone else noticed how weird this was, but every other table was the same. Each person sitting there had someone across from them who wasn't speaking, just staring. I pushed back my chair slightly, planning to say I wasn't feeling well. But before I could stand up, the waiter returned. He set down a plate in front of me with a quiet thud and said I should finish the meal I ordered. Except I hadn't ordered anything. The plate was steaming, and when I looked down, my stomach twisted. It was my favorite meal. The one I always made at home. I needed comfort. Panning with creamy tomato sauce, basil, and a sprinkle of Parmesan. Even the portion size looked exactly like how I plated it. I stared at it confused. There was no way he could have known that. I hadn't mentioned it online, hadn't posted photos, hadn't told him. The waiter stood there waiting. I told him there must have been a mistake, but his face didn't change. He repeated that I should finish what I'd ordered. His tone didn't sound like a suggestion. I looked back at Adrian, hoping he'd finally say something, maybe explain the joke if this was one. But he was still just watching me. His eyes didn't even flicker toward the food. He looked like he was waiting for something specific, waiting for me to move, maybe. I picked up the fork slowly, pretending to play along. I didn't want to eat it, but I figured if I just acted normal, I could get out of there without making it weird. The food smelled exactly right. My stomach growled, but something deep down told me not to touch it. The waiter didn't leave. He stood behind Adrian's chair, completely still, hands folded neatly in front of him. His eyes never left me. I tried to set the fork down gently, but the moment I did, the waiter repeated himself. Same calm voice. Same words. Finish the meal you ordered. I pushed the plate away. My hands were shaking a little. I said I'd lost my appetite, that I wanted to go. The waiter stepped closer, and that's when I realized the room had gone completely silent. The piano wasn't playing anymore. The quiet chatter from the other cables had stopped, too. I turned my head slightly and saw that everyone else was watching me now. Every pair of eyes in the room, all fixed on our table. I stood up fast, muttering that I had to leave. But before I could take a step, the waiter's hand landed gently on my shoulder. It was cold. Too cold. He said the meal wasn't finished. I twisted away from his grip and moved around the table, reaching for my bag. That's when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Underneath the plate, carved faintly into the white porcelain, was a name. My name. The letters looked etched by hand, uneven and rough. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. The waiter didn't try to stop me, but I could feel Adrian's eyes on my back as I rushed past the other tables. None of the other diners moved. They just watched silently, forks frozen in midair. The front door wouldn't open at first. I yanked it harder and harder until it finally gave and cold air hit my face. When I looked back once, the restaurant looked different from outside. The lights seemed dimmer. The people at the tables didn't look real anymore, just shapes sitting in the dark. I walked fast down the street until I couldn't see the place anymore. My phone buzzed in my bag, but when I pulled it out, I realized I had no missed calls or messages. Just one new photo in my gallery. It was of me, sitting at that table, the plate in front of me. I deleted it immediately, heart pounding, but the image stayed burned in my head. When I got home, I locked my door and sat in the dark for a long time. I looked at the restaurant online, trying to figure out if maybe it was part of some prank or performance thing. But the name didn't exist. No address, no reviews, nothing. I even tried walking back the next morning to see if it was still there. The street was the same, but where the restaurant had been was just an empty storefront. Windows covered in black paper. No signs. No lights. I still don't understand what happened. I don't even remember how the food tasted, only that it smelled exactly right, like something that had been made for me long before I ever sat down at that table. Sometimes late at night, I think I can still smell it. That same mix of tomato, basil, and something sweet burning faintly under it. I haven't eaten pasta since. I wasn't planning to go to her place that night. The plan was just dinner. Casual. A small Italian spot near the river where you could hear the water through the open windows. We'd been talking for a couple weeks on an app. Her name was Leela. She was different from the usual people you meet online. She had this dry sense of humor and this weird way of saying things that made her sound mysterious without even trying. Dinner was good. Easy conversation, no awkward pauses. She looked even better in person. Sharp eyes, calm voice, never rushed when she talked. I liked that. When she suggested going back to her place for a drink, it felt natural to say yes. Her apartment was close by, tucked into one of those older brick buildings that look small from the outside but stretch deep inside. The stairwell smelled faintly like paint thinner and candles, an odd mix that made me dizzy for a second. She unlocked the door and pushed it open with a smile. It was dark inside. Not creepy dark, just soft, with a few warm lamps glowing in corners. The air smelled like something floral and heavy, like dried roses and smoke. The place was spotless. Everything in its place, no mess, no clutter. But the first thing that caught my attention was the walls. They were covered in photos. Hundreds of them. Old Polaroids, all in identical frames, arranged in straight lines that wrapped around the entire living room. Some were black and white, some slightly faded from age. They weren't random either. Each one showed a person, mostly men, posing or smiling awkwardly like the pictures were taken mid-conversation. Every photo had a name written under it in small handwriting and a date next to it. I thought it was just some kind of art project at first, something experimental. She told me she liked photography, so maybe these were people she'd photographed over the years. I tried to sound casual, but my eyes kept drifting from one face to another. There were too many for it to just be coincidence. She offered me a drink and disappeared into the kitchen. I walked closer to one of the walls. The frames were perfectly aligned, each one the same distance apart. The handwriting under each photo was identical, neat, looping letters. The earliest dates were from years ago, 2014, 2015, 2016. Then it went up, 2018, 2019, 2020. Each man looked different, different ages, styles, smiles, but there was something about the photos that made them all feel the same. Like they'd been captured in the exact same moment, just swapped out one by one. When she came back, she handed me a glass of wine and asked what I thought of her art. The way she said it made me pause. Her art. I asked her what it meant, how she chose who to photograph. She smiled faintly and said she liked documenting connections, that she believed people left a kind of imprint when they met, and she liked to preserve it. It sounded harmless, poetic even, but the way she said it made the back of my neck feel tight. I kept looking at the photos. There were so many that my eyes started to blur, faces blending into each other. Then one caught my attention near the corner of the room. The man looked vaguely familiar, like someone I'd seen on social media once. I leaned closer, squinting at the name written underneath. The date next to it was from last month. I stepped back and noticed that the more recent ones, the ones from the last few months, all had newer frames, cleaner glass. There were maybe 10 or 12 of them, lined up in a neat little row near the hallway. All men. All different, but all captured the same way. Soft lighting, direct eye contact, that same uneasy half-smile. She asked if I wanted to see more. I didn't really want to, but I didn't know how to say no. She led me down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The hallway walls were worse. Every inch was filled with Polaroids. More faces. More names. My heartbeat started to feel heavy in my chest. I tried to keep calm, to tell myself it was just art. Weird, obsessive art maybe, but art. Still, something about the sheer number of them didn't feel right. It wasn't just a hobby. It was too much. Too precise. At the end of the hallway was a small room. She called it her studio. I hesitated in the doorway while she walked in first and flicked on a lamp. The light was dim, but enough to see. The walls in there were blank, except for one section. A small corkboard with only a few Polaroids pinned to it. One was blank, empty frame, no photo inside. Another had a date written below it, tomorrow's date. And next to it, another empty frame already labeled with a name. My name. For a second, everything went quiet. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at it. The handwriting was the same as all the others. Neat, small, perfectly centered. I turned toward her. She was standing by the table, running her fingers along the edge of a camera. An old Polaroid, the same kind used for all the photos. She looked up, smiling that same calm smile from before, and said she'd like to be organized. My throat felt tight. I tried to laugh it off, to make it sound like a joke, but my voice cracked halfway through. She tilted her head slightly, like she was watching something interesting unravel. I took a step back toward the hallway, trying to keep my movements casual. She didn't follow. She just stood there, the camera still in her hands. The hallway suddenly looked longer than before. I kept my eyes on her as I backed away, pretending to admire the photos again. My palms were sweating, and I could feel the wine glass slipping slightly in my hand. When I reached the living room, I set the glass down carefully and mumbled something about needing to use the restroom. She smiled and pointed toward the hall, but I didn't go that way. I turned the other direction, toward the door. I moved fast, trying not to make noise. My hand shook as I reached for the lock, but it opened easily. I didn't even look back when I stepped out. The hallway outside was silent. I shut the door behind me, forcing myself not to run until I was out of the building. I didn't stop walking until I reached the main road, breathing hard, heart hammering in my ears. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't look. I just kept walking. Later that night, I finally checked my messages. There was one from her, a photo. It was a Polaroid. Me, standing by her door, smiling awkwardly. The caption below it read, "Perfect. Tomorrow." I deleted the message and blocked the number, but I still can't stop thinking about that empty frame on her wall, the one waiting for the picture. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night convinced I hear the sound of a camera shutter in the dark. It sounded innocent when he asked me over to cook dinner together. We'd been talking for a few weeks after meeting online, casual messages at first, then longer ones, late-night voice notes, inside jokes that started to feel too familiar too fast. His name was Aaron, and he had that easy kind of charm that made people feel seen. He never pushed, never came off creepy, just confident. We'd met for coffee once before, and it went fine. Normal. He was polite, a little quiet, but in a thoughtful way. He didn't overshare, didn't touch too much, didn't stare too long. So when he invited me over the following weekend to cook dinner, it felt harmless. He said he loved cooking, and it'd be fun to make something together. I remember thinking it was kind of refreshing. Most guys just wanted to meet at a bar or order takeout. He sounded proud of the idea, like he wanted it to feel meaningful. His apartment was on the edge of the city, in one of those newer buildings with pale stone walls and black railings. I buzzed the intercom, and he came down to meet me at the door, smiling like he'd been waiting all day. He held a grocery bag in one hand, like he just picked up the ingredients. When we got upstairs, the first thing I noticed was how clean everything was. Not just tidy, spotless. No dust, no clutter, not even a misplaced shoe by the door. It smelled like linen and sandalwood, faint but familiar. Too familiar. I stepped further inside, and my chest tightened. His apartment looked exactly like mine. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I'd seen too many modern flats that looked alike. But then I started noticing details. The living room walls were painted the same warm beige color I picked out myself last year. The couch was the same shape, same color, even the same tiny snag on the corner cushion that mine had from when I dropped my keys. On the coffee table sat the same candle I kept on mine, same brand, same scent. Behind the couch, there was a print of abstract mountains, identical to the one in my living room, down to the gold frame. My brain tried to find a logical reason. Maybe these were all just popular items. Maybe we just had the same taste. Coincidences happen, right? But then I looked at the corner of the room, and there it was. A scent diffuser. The same exact one sitting in my apartment. Same shape, same color, same little label with a tear through the logo that I accidentally made months ago while opening mine. He asked if I wanted a drink. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy staring around, trying not to show how uneasy I suddenly felt. I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe he'd mentioned before that he liked neutral tones or clean setups, and I'd forgotten. Maybe I was overanalyzing. But when he went into the kitchen to start prepping dinner, I wandered a few steps further inside. The hallway had a small mirror, the same one I bought online last year, the one with the weirdly uneven wooden frame. On the opposite wall hung a print of a small coastal town, the exact one that hung in my bedroom. My stomach dropped. Every detail matched. The black ceramic vases, the fake plant near the window, even the arrangement of throw pillows on the couch. I told myself to calm down. There had to be an explanation. I walked into the kitchen doorway, trying to sound casual as I asked where he got his stuff. He smiled and said something vague about liking minimal design. But then he turned around, and his shirt caught my eye. It wasn't what he was wearing that freaked me out. It was what was behind him. On the counter sat a fruit bowl, a dark wooden one with a small crack along the rim. The same one I'd gotten from my grandmother years ago. It wasn't a common piece, not something you find at a store. My throat went dry. I told him his place felt oddly familiar. He laughed lightly, like it was a compliment, and said he liked it to feel at home. The words made my skin crawl. He went back to chopping vegetables, humming to himself. I just stood there frozen. The hum echoed faintly, low, rhythmic, the same way I hum when I'm cooking. It didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt intentional. Like every piece of furniture, every smell, every sound had been picked carefully, copied, recreated. I backed up slowly, scanning the room. My eyes landed on the bookshelf near the TV. My heart stopped. The books. They were the same too. Same titles, same order. My exact collection. Even the worn cover on the second one from the top. A book I'd dropped once and bent. The spine still had the faint crease in the same place. I wanted to ask him how he knew, but I couldn't make the words come up. He looked up at me then, smiling wider than before. He said something about how it was nice when two people had the same taste. I muttered something about needing to use the bathroom, and he nodded, gesturing down the hall. My feet felt heavy, but I forced myself to walk. When I turned the corner, my breath caught again. The hallway had 3 doors, one slightly open. I pushed it gently. Inside was a bedroom. And it wasn't just similar to mine. It was mine. Same bedding. Same framed photo above the headboard. Same lamp, same rug, same bedside table with a faint scratch across the top. My perfume bottle sat there too, the one that had been missing from my dresser last week. I'd assumed I'd misplaced it. I stepped closer, barely breathing. The drawers were half open, filled with clothes. Not just any clothes. My clothes. Folded, arranged. A sound came from behind me, the soft creak of a floorboard. I spun around. He was standing at the doorway, holding a glass of wine. He didn't look surprised to see me there. He just looked content. He said something like he'd been waiting for me to feel comfortable, that it made him happy when people recognized the effort he put in. His voice was calm, too calm. My body reacted before my brain did. I shoved past him, sprinted down the hall, grabbed my bag, and ran for the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely open it. I didn't stop until I was outside on the street, heart pounding, lungs burning. I looked back once, and the lights in his apartment were still on. He hadn't followed me. When I got home, the first thing I did was check my own apartment. Everything was exactly how I'd left it, except one thing. The scent diffuser on my shelf was gone. That same night, I blocked his number. The next morning, his profile was deleted from every platform. Sometimes when I walk past my window, I swear I catch a faint smell of sandalwood and linen drifting in from outside. The same smell that used to make my place feel safe. Now it just feels like he's still somewhere nearby, waiting for me to come home. I didn't think much of it when she offered to drive me home. The night had gone better than I expected, maybe too well. Her name was Chloe, and she was the kind of person who instantly made everyone around her feel like they'd known her for years. She had this confidence, this calm energy, and it made me let my guard down faster than I usually do. We'd met through a friend of a friend. She wasn't on any apps, which honestly made her seem more genuine. She texted like she actually meant what she said. No games, no weird emojis, just direct. Dinner was her idea. Some quiet little restaurant just outside of town. Candles, small tables, that kind of vibe. It was almost empty when we got there, which made it feel private, like we were in our own world for a bit. Everything about the night was easy. The conversation flowed. She laughed at my jokes, asked questions, actually listened. There wasn't a single awkward pause. I remember thinking that she seemed like the kind of person who had her life perfectly together. By the end of dinner, it was late. The buses had stopped running, and I was about to call a ride when she said she could drop me off. Her car was parked right out front, a small, dark SUV. It looked spotless from the outside, polished like she washed it that morning. When I got in, the front smelled like something clean. Citrus, maybe. The dashboard was neat. No trash, no clutter. Everything was organized. But when I glanced into the back seat, I noticed toys. They were everywhere. Small stuffed animals, little cars, some plastic blocks in a box on the floor. It looked like a daycare on wheels. She caught me looking and laughed, saying she babysat sometimes. She said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. I nodded, tried to play it cool, but the number of toys didn't really match sometimes. There were at least 3 different car seats lined up, and one of them had a blanket tucked in like someone had just been sitting there. We started driving, and I kept trying not to stare back there. The light from passing cars flickered across the seats, making everything look slightly different every few seconds. A doll's glass eyes caught the reflection once, and I jumped a little without meaning to. She noticed and smiled, teasing me for being jumpy. The road was quiet, and her driving was smooth. She hummed along to the radio, some song I didn't recognize. It was peaceful for a few minutes. Then I started noticing small things that didn't sit right. The toys weren't random. It looked like they belonged to specific kids. Each seat had something on it. A stuffed animal, a blanket, a sippy cup, like they were set up on purpose. Then I saw the names. I only noticed because the headlights from a car behind us hit the seats just right. The first one had a name scrawled in marker across the back, AME. The second one said Josh, and then my chest tightened when I saw the third one. It had my name on it. For a second, I thought maybe I imagined it. The light faded, and I blinked hard, trying to convince myself it was just a reflection or a weird shadow. But when another car passed, I saw it again, clear as day. My name, written in thick black marker across the headrest of the third car seat. I froze. My mouth went dry. I didn't know what to say or if I should say anything at all. She was still humming quietly, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. I forced myself to look forward, pretending I hadn't seen it. My brain was going in circles trying to make sense of it. Maybe she bought used car seats. Maybe the names belonged to the kids she babysat. But why would my name be there? I asked her where she usually babysat. She said something about working with families in the area. Her voice stayed calm, but the answer didn't really say anything. Then she changed the subject, started talking about how much she liked this road, how quiet it was at night, how it helped her think. The more she talked, the more it started to feel like we weren't heading toward my neighborhood anymore. I knew these streets pretty well, but the turns she took didn't look familiar. I asked where we were going, and she said it was a shortcut. I tried to keep my voice steady, saying that I could just walk from wherever we were. She smiled and said something about wanting to make sure I got home safe. Her tone didn't sound strange, but there was something in the way she said it that made my stomach twist. I glanced down at the door handle. I could lead if I had to, right? But when I reached for it casually, it didn't move. It wasn't just locked, it was jammed. She noticed my hand and gave me a side glance, still smiling. She said something about how it automatically locked when she drove. I laughed nervously, trying to sound like I believed it, though my pulse was pounding in my ears. The road was getting darker. We passed a sign I didn't recognize, and the trees on both sides seemed to close in. I could see my reflection faintly in the window, pale, tense, barely breathing. Then she slowed down. The tires crunched on gravel as she pulled to the side of the road. She said she needed to check something. My whole body went rigid. She got out, leaving the headlights on. The glow filled the car, bouncing off the toys in the back seat. I turned around, staring at them, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Then I noticed something else, small drawings taped to the back of the passenger seat. Crayon drawings, stick figures holding hands. One of them had a woman with long dark hair. Another had my name written at the top in shaky handwriting. I didn't think. I just started pulling at the door handle again, harder this time. It clicked open suddenly. I don't know how. And I bolted out of the car. I ran toward the nearest bit of light I could see in the distance, which turned out to be a small gas station. When I turned around once, I saw her still standing by the car, her silhouette perfectly still in the headlights. She didn't chase me. She didn't even move. She just stood there watching. The gas station clerk called a cab for me. I didn't tell him the full story, just said I needed a ride. I looked back out the window a few times, expecting to see her car, but it never showed up. When I got home, I tried to look her up online, but the number she'd given me was disconnected. The friend who'd introduced us swore she didn't know anyone named Chloe. I keep replaying that night in my head. The names on the car seats, the drawings, the way she looked at me when I reached for the handle. I still don't know how she knew my name before I told her. Sometimes I wonder if the car seat's still there, sitting in the back of her SUV, waiting for whoever she picks up next. It started out perfect. The kind of date that makes you think maybe the apps aren't all that bad. He was funny, polite, and easy to talk to. His name was Josh, and we'd matched 2 weeks earlier. He had one of those calm voices that made everything sound safe. We met at a small restaurant downtown, one of those dimly lit places with quiet music and candles that make everyone look better than they really do. From the minute I sat down, I felt relaxed. He didn't make weird jokes, didn't talk over me, didn't check his phone. He asked questions and actually listened. We laughed a lot. I even remember thinking, halfway through dinner, that it had been a long time since I'd had such an easy night. When the check came, he insisted on paying. I tried to argue, but he waved it off and said he wanted to. It wasn't in that controlling kind of way, or at least it didn't seem like it then. It felt normal. After dinner, he suggested grabbing ice cream, and I agreed. We walked a few blocks to a tiny shop that was still open, talking about music and dumb TV shows the whole way. The night air felt nice, and I remember thinking how rare it was to actually click with someone like that. There was no pressure, no awkward pauses. He seemed like the type of person you could just exist around without having to try so hard. When it started getting late, he offered to drive me home. I told him I could get a cab, but he said it was no trouble since his car was parked nearby. He looked genuinely concerned, so I agreed. His car was spotless. It smelled faintly of cologne and something sweet. Maybe air freshener. The seats were soft, and he even opened the passenger door for me before getting in himself. It felt old school, but in a charming way. We started driving, and everything still felt normal. The streetlights passed by in long orange streaks through the windows, and the radio was low, playing something slow. He asked about my neighborhood, my family, my plans for the weekend. It was easy conversation again. Then he missed a turn. I pointed it out, but he said it was fine, that he knew a shortcut that avoided traffic. I didn't think much of it at first. He sounded confident, and the roads were quiet, but after a few minutes, we weren't near anything I recognized. The buildings disappeared, replaced by trees and empty lots. I started to feel uneasy. The road got narrower, darker. The only light came from the car's headlights cutting through the empty stretch ahead. The silence hit harder out there. No cars, no people, just the sound of the tires on gravel. I told him I thought he'd gone the wrong way. He said he hadn't. He said he just wanted to talk for a bit before driving me off. I tried to laugh it off, but my hands were already tense in my lap. He slowed the car and turned onto an even smaller road, barely wide enough for 2 cars. There were no street lights, just trees on both sides, the kind of place where your phone signal disappears. My chest started to tighten. He parked in the middle of the road and turned off the engine. The silence was instant and heavy. The air felt colder somehow. I told him I really needed to get home. He just smiled, resting one hand on the steering wheel. That's when I reached for the door handle. It didn't move. I tried again, pulling harder this time, but it was stuck. My pulse started racing. I looked at him, and he was still smiling. Not a friendly smile anymore, but something else. He said he always locks the doors when he drives. He said it was just a habit. The way he said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't what he said. It was how calm he sounded, like he'd been waiting for me to try it. I stared at the handle, then at the window, wondering if I could roll it down or hit something. My mind went blank. I tried to stay calm, tried to think logically, but everything in me was screaming to get out. He kept talking about how most people pretend to be something they're not, how everyone puts on a show, how he liked that I seemed real. Every word made my stomach turn. I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting for some kind of reaction. I told him I didn't feel well, that I needed air. He laughed softly, like he didn't believe me. I reached for my phone, but it was deep in my bag, and I didn't want to make any sudden moves. My fingers brushed the zipper, but I stopped when he turned slightly toward me. Then his smile dropped. He leaned back, eyes narrowing like he was studying me. The silence stretched until I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't dare move. He asked why I looked scared. I didn't answer. He said he wouldn't hurt me, that he just wanted to understand me better. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. I glanced at the dashboard, looking for anything. A button, a switch, something that could unlock the door. Then I noticed the lock symbol glowing faintly near the handle. I pressed it without thinking. The click was louder than it should have been. He froze. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I grabbed the handle again and shoved it open as hard as I could. The door flew wide, and I bolted out before he could react. The gravel crunched under my shoes, and I didn't stop running until I saw a faint glow in the distance. Headlights. I waved like a maniac, screaming for help. It was another car, an old pickup heading the opposite direction. The driver slowed, rolled down his window, and stared at me like I'd just crawled out of the woods. I managed to get a few words out about someone following me. When I turned around, the road behind me was empty. His car was gone. No headlights, no sound, nothing. Just a dark stretch of road and the echo of my own breathing. The man in the truck drove me to the nearest gas station, and I called the police from there. They said they'd send someone to check the area, but I never heard back about it. When I got home, I sat in my room for hours, replaying everything in my head. The way he smiled. The way the door handle felt when it wouldn't open. That road with no lights. The next morning, I checked the app we met on. His profile was gone. No messages, no history, no trace. It was like he'd never existed. I still don't know what his real name was. Sometimes when I'm driving at night, I still check the door locks without realizing it. And when the road gets too quiet, I swear I can still hear his voice. Calm, soft, like he's sitting right next to me again. Just a habit, he said. I wasn't expecting her to look like that. Usually when people say she's gorgeous, it's an exaggeration, but this time it wasn't. She walked in like she'd stepped out of some movie. Sharp black eyeliner, long dark hair, and this confidence that made everyone in the restaurant look twice. For a second, I actually thought she'd mistaken me for someone else. Her name was Riley. We've been talking for a week on a dating app, just casual stuff, nothing deep. She didn't have many photos, just 2 selfies and a blurry one at a concert, but her messages were funny and quick, not the usual, hey, what you doing type. She was smart too. She actually knew how to hold a conversation, which was rare. When she asked if I wanted to grab dinner, I didn't hesitate. When she showed up, she smiled like she'd known me for years. The way she said my name threw me off. It was calm, familiar, like we'd spoken in person before. I brushed it off and tried to focus on acting normal, but there was something about the way she looked straight at me that made it hard to relax. We sat down and everything started fine. She was charming, funny, and weirdly easy to talk to. It wasn't awkward at all, which is unusual for a first date. We ordered drinks, and she started talking about music. That's when things got strange. She brought up one of my favorite bands, not a famous one, some small indie group I'd listened to for years. I laughed and asked how she knew them, but she just smiled and said she figured I might be into that kind of sound. Then she mentioned another band, and another. Each one was spot on. It freaked me out a little because those weren't things I'd ever post about. My playlists are private, my socials barely exist, and I definitely never mentioned any of it in our messages. But she knew every one of them. She even quoted lyrics I loved, lyrics I used to write on my old notebooks back in college. At first, I thought it was just a lucky guess. People can get a general sense of taste right. But then she brought up skateboarding, saying something about how she used to hang around parks when she was younger. Then she mentioned gaming, specifically the exact game I've been obsessed with for months. She even knew the name of the character I always pick online. That was the moment I froze, because that's not something anyone would know, not unless they'd been in my lobby or seen my screen. I tried to act chill, but my mind was racing. I asked her how she knew about it, but she just said she had a good memory. Then she started talking about my old dog. My dog, the one that died when I was 16. She said his name, word for word. I dropped my fork. My hands went cold, and I just stared at her. She didn't even look surprised. She just smiled and tilted her head, waiting for me to say something. I told her I didn't remember telling her that. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine, and that's when she said it. You're not as different as you think. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like she was correcting me. I laughed, but it came out shaky. I didn't even know what she meant. She just sat there, watching me with this expression that was impossible to read. The lights in the restaurant flickered slightly, and for some reason that made it worse. I asked if we'd met before. She didn't answer right away. Then she said something about how people always think they're original. The way she said it gave me chills, like she'd been waiting to say that exact line. I couldn't eat after that. I just kept sipping my drink, pretending to listen as she went on about how predictable people were. She talked about routines, habits, the things people think make them unique but don't. It wasn't even part of the conversation anymore. It was like she'd switched to giving a speech. Then she started describing me. Not in a general way. She described things no one else could know. How I leave one sock on when I sleep. How I tap my fingers when I'm thinking. How I eat cereal dry. She even said I always park my car in the third row of the lot near my building. That last one made my stomach drop. Because that wasn't just true. It was something she couldn't possibly have known unless she'd been there. I tried to stay calm, told myself maybe she'd just seen me before and recognized me from the app. But deep down I knew that wasn't it. She was too specific, too deliberate. When the waiter came to clear the plates, I used the moment to check my phone under the table. No new messages, no missed calls, nothing weird. I opened the app we'd met on, and her profile was gone. Not deactivated, gone, like it had never existed. I looked back up, and she was watching me again. Same calm smile. She asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't feeling great, and probably needed to head home. She didn't look offended. In fact, she looked pleased, like that was exactly what she wanted me to say. She stood up before I did, said she had to go too, and grabbed her coat. When she walked past me, she paused for a second, leaned close to my ear, and said something so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. "You'll see soon." Then she left. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to process what just happened. My food was cold, and the noise of the restaurant suddenly felt too loud. I paid the bill quickly and went to my car. When I got to the parking lot, there was something sitting on my windshield, a small piece of paper folded in half. I looked around, but the lot was mostly empty. I picked it up, unfolded it, and froze. It was a photo, a picture of me, sitting in that exact restaurant earlier that evening. I was looking down at my phone, completely unaware. On the back, written in messy handwriting, was the same phrase she'd said before. "You're not as different as you think." That night, I checked everywhere online for her again. Her name, her photos, anything. Nothing. Every trace of her was gone. It's been months, and sometimes I still think I see her face in crowds. Not watching me exactly, just nearby like she's waiting. And sometimes when I go to that same restaurant, I catch people looking at me like they already know who I am. I stopped telling people about my hobbies. I deleted half my accounts. But every once in a while, I get this feeling that someone's reading over my shoulder when I'm online. Like no matter what I change, I'm still just part of something bigger that I don't understand. Maybe that's what she meant. Maybe I really wasn't that different after all. I wasn't even planning on going that night. I'd been staring at my phone for half an hour, debating whether to cancel or not. The guy's name was Daniel, and we'd matched on some dating app a few days earlier. He'd been funny, respectful, asked real questions instead of the usual small talk. He wasn't pushy, which I liked. His profile said he worked in finance, liked hiking, and had a dog named Milo. Normal enough. He suggested dinner at his quiet restaurant near the city center. Not too fancy, not cheap either. It seemed like he'd actually thought about it. I told myself I'd give it a chance. Worst case, I'd leave early. When I got there, he was already sitting at a table by the window. I recognized him right away from his photos. Same dark hair, same calm smile. He stood when he saw me and pulled the chair out, which no one ever does anymore. He looked like the kind of guy who actually listens when you talk. The first few minutes were great. He was polite, charming, a little funny in a dry way. I felt comfortable almost instantly, which should have been the first red flag. We ordered food, and the conversation just flowed. He told me about his job, his family, a recent trip to Italy. He asked about mine, and I told him about my sister, my work, my dog that passed away years ago. When I mentioned the dog, he smiled like he already knew. I thought maybe it was just coincidence. Then, halfway through the meal, something started to feel strange. He mentioned my sister again, by name. I didn't remember telling him that part. He said it casually, like it wasn't weird at all. I froze for a second, but tried to play it off, thinking maybe I had said it earlier and just forgot. A few minutes later, he asked about my ex. Not just your ex, but his name, where he worked, and even the car he used to drive. The way he said it made it sound like he was confirming something, not asking. I laughed awkwardly and asked how he knew that, and he said I must have told him in our chats. I checked the app later. Nothing like that was ever mentioned. He started bringing up more things. Little details that no stranger should have known. My old address. My childhood best friend. The name of my first school. Even my dog, not just that I had one, but his actual name, Max. At first, I tried to convince myself maybe I had overshared somewhere online. Maybe my Facebook was still public or something. But some of the things he mentioned weren't even online. I'd never posted about them anywhere. They were private things I hadn't talked about in years. Every time he said something new, that comfortable feeling I'd had earlier drained a bit more. I couldn't focus on eating anymore. My stomach felt tight. I kept looking at the restaurant's door, thinking about leaving, but I didn't want to make a scene. He noticed I'd gone quiet and smiled in this slow, knowing way. That's when he leaned in slightly, resting his elbows on the table, and said it. "You really don't remember me, do you?" My heart dropped. I stared at him, trying to place his face, his voice, anything that might connect to something from my past, but nothing clicked. He looked familiar, sure, but in the vague way that strangers sometimes do. I said I didn't think we'd met before. He just kept smiling, like I was lying to myself. He started talking about things that happened years ago, stuff that made no sense. He mentioned a park where we used to go, a bench where we sat one summer evening, and a conversation about our plans for the future. I had no idea what he was talking about. I told him he must have me confused with someone else, but he didn't seem to hear me. He just nodded like he was remembering something fondly. He said he'd been waiting for this for a long time. His tone wasn't angry or threatening. It was calm, too calm. That made it worse. The waiter came by to ask if we wanted dessert, and I immediately said no. I stood up and said I needed to use the bathroom just to get away from the table. In the mirror, my face looked pale. My hands were shaking. I tried to remember if there was anything in my past that connected to him, but there wasn't. I would have remembered someone like that. When I came back, he was still sitting there, hands folded neatly on the table, just watching me. The food was gone, and the plates had been cleared, but he hadn't moved. I sat down slowly, trying to act normal. He asked if I was okay, and I said I needed to go home. He didn't argue. He just nodded, paid the bill, and stood up. I was expecting him to walk me out, but he didn't. He just stayed there as I grabbed my bag. Before I left, he said quietly that he'd see me again soon. I walked fast all the way to my car. My phone buzzed, and I didn't even want to look at it. When I finally did, there was a message from him already. It said, "I knew you'd come." That night, I barely slept. I went through all my social media, checking every post, every photo, trying to figure out how he could have known all those things. Nothing added up. Some of the details he mentioned were from before I even had social media. I called my sister the next morning and told her about it, and she said his name didn't ring any bells either. A week passed, and I tried to forget about it. Then I got a letter in the mail. Not typed. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name on the front. Inside was a photo. It was old, probably 10 or 12 years ago. It was me sitting on a park bench, smiling at the camera. And next to me, someone had been cut out of the picture. You could see part of an arm and a bit of a sleeve, but not the face. The back of the photo had a date written on it in blue ink. I flipped it over again and stared at it for a long time. I don't even remember that day. I still have the photo. I've shown it to friends, to my family, and no one knows where it came from. Sometimes I think maybe he really did know me once. Maybe when I was younger, before I could remember much. Other times, I wonder if he just found a way to make me think he did. Either way, I can't get his voice out of my head. You really don't remember me, do you? I knew something was off the second I walked into her house. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a weird smell I couldn't place. Not bad exactly, but strange, like a mix of raw meat and cleaning chemicals. I tried to tell myself it was just from cooking. I mean, she'd been texting me all week about how she wanted to cook something special for our first date. I thought it was sweet. A little intense maybe, but sweet. Her name was Mia. We'd been talking online for a couple of weeks, and she was the one who suggested doing dinner at her place instead of going out. I thought it was a bit fast, but she sounded so excited that I just went along with it. She said she loved cooking and that I was in for a surprise. I figured that meant lasagna or something normal. Nah, whatever that night turned into. Her house was tiny but spotless. Every surface looked like it had been wiped down 5 minutes before I arrived. The air smelled heavy, and the curtains were half closed even though it was still bright outside. She greeted me with this big, too wide smile and handed me a drink before I even took my shoes off. I asked what she was making, and she said it was her grandmother's recipe. When I tried to ask what kind of dish it was, she just winked and told me not to ruin the surprise. I remember laughing awkwardly because I didn't want to seem rude, but something about the way she said it made me feel weird. While she cooked, I sat on the couch trying to ignore how strange the smell was getting. It wasn't like normal food. It was heavier, almost metallic. I could hear her humming in the kitchen, some old tune I didn't recognize, and every now and then she'd call out something random about presentation and texture. I couldn't tell if she was talking to me or herself. When she finally came out, she was holding 2 plates with a grin that looked proud enough to burst. The food looked strange. It was a kind of stew, dark brown and oily, with pieces of meat that didn't look right. The smell hit me first, rich, sweet, and kind of sour at the same time. I tried to smile, but I could feel my stomach twisting already. She sat down across from me and just stared, waiting for me to take the first bite. I didn't want to be rude, so I picked up the spoon and scooped a bit. The meat was chewy, almost rubbery. It didn't taste like beef, not really like chicken either, just wrong. The texture was off, too dense and stringy, like something that shouldn't be eaten. I tried to swallow it quickly, but the taste lingered. She looked thrilled, watching my reaction like she'd just passed a test. I said it was interesting, and she clapped her hands, saying she was glad I liked it. Then she insisted I eat more. I wanted to stop, but she wouldn't let me. Every time my spoon slowed down, she'd lean forward and say I had to finish it because it was good manners. She even pushed the bowl closer when I hesitated. Her tone wasn't angry, but there was something off about it, like she'd snap if I refused. So I kept eating, forcing down bite after bite while she talked about how she'd spent hours preparing it. My throat burned from the spice, and I could feel sweat building up at the back of my neck. She didn't even eat that much herself, just picked at it slowly, eyes on me the whole time. Halfway through, I felt sick. My stomach cramped, and I could feel something heavy sitting inside me like a rock. I tried to excuse myself to the bathroom, but she said I should sit and let it settle. She smiled the whole time, but there was something cold behind her eyes. I told her I was fine, but she didn't stop watching until I cleaned the bowl completely. Afterward, she made tea and started talking about animals. At first, it was normal stuff. How she loved horses. How she used to ride when she was younger. Then she mentioned how she never wasted anything. I didn't really get what she meant until she started talking about her uncle, who apparently worked on a farm overseas. She said he sent her special cuts sometimes. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. That's when my stomach dropped. I asked what kind of meat it was, and she just smiled. She said, "It's not common here, but it's perfectly fine to eat in some countries." She didn't say the word, but I knew. The look in her eyes told me. I pushed my chair back, but my legs felt weak. She stood up too, tilting her head like she was confused why I looked upset. I barely managed to say goodbye before getting out of there. The second I got outside, I threw up on the sidewalk. My throat burned, and my stomach kept clenching like it was trying to push out what I'd eaten. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept telling myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she just said something weird. But the taste was still in my mouth, and I knew it wasn't beef or pork or anything normal. It haunted me. The next day, I looked up her name on social media out of curiosity, and that's when I found her old posts. Photos of horses. Dozens of them. Her standing next to them, brushing their manes, feeding them. But the captions were strange. Things like nothing goes to waste, and honoring them in every form. The newest post was from just a week before our date. It said, "He was a good one. My heart is full." And below it, a picture of her freezer full of vacuum-sealed bags. I couldn't eat for 2 days after that. The thought of it made me sick all over again. She texted me later that week asking how I was feeling. I didn't reply. Then she sent another message saying she hoped I enjoyed something real for once. That was the last one I got before I blocked her. I still can't eat stew. The smell alone makes me gag. Sometimes I wake up thinking I can still taste that weird sweetness at the back of my throat. I told one friend about it, and he said maybe she was lying, that people online say stuff like that for attention. I wanted to believe that, but deep down I know she wasn't lying. Her face when she watched me eat, it wasn't just pride, it was satisfaction. The worst part is I don't even know what kind of meat it really was. I just know it wasn't supposed to be on a dinner plate. I honestly thought it was nerves at first. You know that weird feeling you get before meeting someone new? The tight stomach, the dry mouth, the constant urge to check your reflection. That's what I thought it was. But looking back, I should have known something was wrong before I even left the house. Her name was Ava. We met online, talked for a couple of weeks, and decided to meet up for dinner. She picked a small Italian place near the river. I'd been looking forward to it all week. Everything about her seemed easy, her texts, her humor, even her voice notes. I wanted it to go right. The day of the date, I woke up feeling off. My stomach felt heavy, like I'd swallowed something bad, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just hunger or anxiety. I barely ate all day so I wouldn't look bloated, which probably made things worse. By the time I got to the restaurant, I could feel my body getting weird. My skin was clammy, my hands were cold, and I kept feeling like I needed to sit down. I got there before her, ordered water, and told myself to get it together. When she walked in, she looked even better in person. I tried to act normal, smiling and joking like I wasn't about to pass out. We ordered pasta and some wine, and for the first 10 minutes, everything felt fine. Then the nausea hit out of nowhere. I tried to keep talking, but I could feel sweat running down my back. My stomach started twisting like someone was wringing it out. Every sound in the restaurant got louder. The clinking glasses, the laughter, the music. It all blended into this blur while I tried not to throw up on the table. She noticed, obviously. She asked if I was okay, and I just nodded, pretending to cough into my napkin. I barely touched my food. I remember staring at the plate of spaghetti like it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen. The smell of garlic made me gag. I excused myself to the bathroom, thinking maybe I just needed a minute. But as soon as I locked the stall door, I threw up so hard I thought I was going to pass out. It wasn't just food. It felt like my whole body was rejecting itself. When I came back out, I could barely stand. My hands were shaking, my vision was blurry, and my legs felt like they weren't mine. She stood up right away, looking scared. I tried to say something, but I don't even remember what came out. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor. I woke up in a hospital bed hours later. The lights were too bright, and there was an IV in my arm. My mouth was dry and my throat burned, and everything smelled like disinfectant. A nurse came in and said I'd been brought in by an ambulance. Apparently, Ava had called for help after I fainted. They said I had some kind of severe stomach infection, probably viral. The doctor mentioned food poisoning at first, but when the test came back, it turned out to be a stomach bug that was going around. My temperature had shot up to nearly 40 degrees Celsius, and my blood pressure had dropped. No wonder I felt like death. Ava showed up at the hospital the next morning. She looked exhausted, probably from the whole ordeal. She brought some stuff: water, snacks, her phone charger, like she didn't plan to leave right away. I was embarrassed more than anything. Who collapses on a first date? She stayed for a few hours, sitting next to the bed while I tried to drink water without feeling like I'd puke again. Every now and then, she'd laugh it off, saying it'd be a funny story someday. But I could tell she was a bit freaked out. I don't blame her. I was kept for 2 nights. The second night, I started to feel human again. My stomach still hurt, but I wasn't dizzy anymore. When I finally got discharged, she offered to give me a ride home. It was quiet in the car. She said she'd check up on me in a few days, but I didn't expect to actually hear from her again. 3 days later, she texted me saying she'd been throwing up since the morning. I felt terrible. I told her to go to the doctor, but she said she thought it was just something she ate. Then she said she couldn't stop sweating and her stomach felt like it was tearing itself apart. I didn't want to say it, but I knew exactly what it was. She'd caught it from me. Later that night, she messaged again, saying she was in A and E dehydrated weak, the same symptoms I'd had. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know you could pass something like that through casual contact, but I guess when you're sharing drinks and sitting close, it's possible. The weird part was how bad hers got. She texted me from the hospital saying the doctors were confused because her blood pressure was dropping fast and her fever wouldn't go down. She stayed overnight too. For someone who was perfectly fine a few days earlier, it felt unreal how quickly everything fell apart. For the next week, we kept messaging each other from our separate beds, joking about how cursed the date was. But underneath the jokes, it was kind of unsettling. We both got so sick so suddenly. When she finally got discharged, she called me. Her voice sounded weaker, slower. She said her body felt heavy, like she hadn't fully recovered. I knew exactly what she meant because I still didn't feel right either. My stomach would twist randomly, even when I hadn't eaten. We never met up again after that. I think both of us just associated each other with that night. It wasn't even awkward, just cursed. Like some weird reminder that one dinner can completely ruin your body. A few weeks later, I passed by that same restaurant on my way to work. The lights were off. A sign on the door said they were closed for deep cleaning. I didn't think much of it until I saw a local news post later that week saying several people had been hospitalized after eating there. Something about cross-contamination or a viral spread. I wanted to message her and tell her I'd seen it, but she never replied to my last text. Her profile on the app disappeared too. Maybe she deleted it. Maybe she didn't want anything to do with that night ever again. Now, every time I feel the slightest stomach pain, I get paranoid. It's like my body still remembers lying on that cold restaurant floor, sweating and gasping while strangers stared. That date didn't just go wrong, it wrecked both of us. The last thing she ever sent me was a photo of a hospital wristband with the words "never again" written in the caption. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. I don't even know why I agreed to go. She seemed normal online, funny, confident, a little over the top sometimes, but still cool. Her name was Layla. We met on this dating app where every conversation somehow turned into a debate about food. We joked around about our favorite restaurants, and she told me she loved big groups and good vibes. I didn't think much of it. I figured she just liked being social. She suggested we go out to this new Korean barbecue spot that had just opened downtown. The place had been all over TikTok, and I thought it'd be perfect. Casual enough for a first date, not too fancy. She said she'd handle the reservation, which already felt like a good sign. Most people don't bother doing that. When the night came, I got there a bit early. The restaurant was packed, all sizzling grills and people laughing too loud. I texted her saying I'd grab a table for two near the back. She replied, saying she was bringing a few friends, but they wouldn't be staying long. I figured maybe one or two. Maybe someone dropping by. 10 minutes later, I saw her walk in, and behind her was a whole crowd. Not two, not five, 17 people, I counted. She looked excited, waving like it was totally normal, walking in like she owned the place. My jaw nearly dropped. They all followed her, chatting, laughing, carrying bags and phones and drinks. It looked like a birthday dinner, not a first date. I just sat there frozen as she hugged me and introduced everyone one by one. Her cousins, her besties, even a coworker who didn't look like they wanted to be there. I couldn't even remember half their names. Before I could even process what was happening, it started pulling chairs over, squeezing around the table. The waiter had to rearrange everything to fit them. I tried to make a joke about it, but nobody really heard me over the noise. The grills were already heating up, and people were ordering like they'd been starving for days. Layla acted completely normal. She leaned back in her seat, scrolling on her phone, laughing every now and then. Meanwhile, her friends were shouting over each other, asking for drinks, side dishes, extra meat, noodles, desserts, everything. The table looked like a buffet in minutes. I sat there, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank, but she kept saying how sweet it was that I'd picked such a good spot. I didn't even pick it. She did. As the food kept coming, I felt more and more out of place. The conversation didn't even include me. They talked about mutual friends, drama, work, whatever. Every now and then she'd glance at me and smile like this was all totally fine. I kept waiting for her to say something like, "Don't worry, everyone's paying for themselves." But that sentence never came. When the waiter dropped the bill folder on the table, everyone went quiet for a second. Then Layla looked straight at me. That's when it hit me. She expected me to pay. For everyone. I laughed a little because I thought it had to be a joke. There was no way she was serious. but then one of her friends thanked me for inviting them out. I almost choked. The waiter came back and stood there waiting. Layla nudged the folder closer to me like it was some kind of test. I opened it, and my chest tightened. The total was just over 900 pounds. My brain went blank. I looked around the table, and everyone was just chatting again like it was no big deal. Someone even ordered another round of drinks after the bill was sitting right in front of me. I tried saying something, but the music was too loud and no one was listening. Layla leaned closer and told me that a real gentleman wouldn't make a fuss. That's when I realized she wasn't joking. She actually thought I was going to pay for all 18 of them. I told her I didn't have that kind of money on me, and she rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Then she turned to her friends and started whispering. They all gave me looks like I'd ruined their night. One of them even said something under her breath about cheap men. My hands were sweating. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even eat that much. Maybe 2 pieces of meat and a soda. I kept thinking about how insane this was. Who even does that? The waiter came back again, clearly uncomfortable. I told him I'd pay for my portion, and that was it. Leda stood up, slammed her napkin down, and started arguing. She said I led her on, that I'd promised her a nice night. Everyone at the table was staring now. Other customers were staring too. I could feel my face burning. The waiter tried to calm things down, but she kept going. She said she'd post about it online that I embarrassed her. I didn't even wait for her to finish. I pulled out enough cash to cover my part and walked out. I could still hear her yelling behind me as I left. I didn't even look back. When I got outside, the cold air hit me, and I just stood there for a second trying to process what just happened. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Texts from her calling me rude, selfish, cheap, every insult she could think of. Then she sent a photo of the bill with some long message about how a real man would have stepped up. I blocked her. The next day, my friend sent me a screenshot from Twitter. She posted about me. Said I'd abandoned her and her friends with the bill. The post had hundreds of likes, and people were commenting without even knowing the full story. I tried to ignore it, but it kept spreading. By the end of the day, I got a message from one of her friends saying the restaurant had called the police because they all left without paying. She asked if I could help out since my name was on the reservation. I didn't even reply. Later that week, I passed by that same restaurant with some coworkers. The waiter from that night recognized me. He just shook his head and said she'd been there again with another guy. Same thing. Big group, big bill. He said that time the guy actually paid. I don't even know what to call that. Catfishing but worse. Like a scam hidden under fake eyelashes and lip gloss. Now every time someone says, let's grab dinner, I double check how many people they mean. It's been months, but I still remember that table, crowded, loud, full of strangers, eating like it was their birthday while I sat there quietly, realizing I'd been set up from the moment I agreed to meet her. I should have known something was off the second she said she didn't like phone calls or video chats. She always had an excuse. Bad lighting, cracked camera, feeling bare-faced. I didn't think much of it though, because she sounded young. Her texts were casual, funny, even a little flirty in a clumsy way. She said her name was Lila, 26, blonde, lived alone, worked in fashion or something like that. The pictures she sent were perfect. Too perfect, honestly. Blonde hair, green eyes, those filters that made the skin glow. I guess I just wanted to believe it. We talked for 2 weeks straight, every day. Morning texts, late night chats. She'd send photos of coffee, her outfits of the day, and random mirror pics that looked straight out of Pinterest. When she suggested meeting in person, I didn't hesitate. I was just happy she actually wanted to meet. She picked a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind with velvet seats and a piano in the corner. I thought that was a bit much for a first date, but she said she wanted somewhere quiet. So there I was on a Friday night, wearing my best shirt, sitting at a table for 2 near the back. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her to text that she'd arrived. She was late, which didn't surprise me. Every girl I'd ever met off an app was late. About 20 minutes in, the waiter came over asking if I wanted to order a drink. I said I'd wait a bit longer. Then I noticed someone walking toward me from the entrance. Not her. Not even close. This woman had to be at least 60. Short gray hair, lipstick smudged a little outside the lines, heavy perfume that hit me before she even sat down. She was wearing a red dress with sequins, the kind you'd see at a ballroom, not a first date. I remember just staring, waiting for her to walk past me. But she didn't. She stopped right in front of my table. When she smiled, I felt my stomach twist. Her teeth were slightly yellowed, and her lipstick had bulled into the corners of her mouth. She said my name, calm and sure, like she'd practiced it. I froze. It took a second for my brain to catch up. I asked who she was, and she said she was Leela. I thought it was a joke at first, like maybe she was someone's aunt filling in or trying to prank me. But she just sat down, crossed her legs, and started talking like nothing was wrong. She said the photos were her niece, that she used them because men never respond to older women. She said she'd been looking for someone who understood maturity, and that I seemed like the type who could handle it. I just sat there speechless, watching her pick up the menu with shaky, ring-covered hands. My face felt hot. Everyone around us probably thought she was my grandmother. I tried to stand up and say I had to go, but she reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her hand was ice cold. She told me she wasn't there to waste my time, that she was serious about wanting someone in her life. Then she said something that made my whole body tense. She said she wanted to take care of me. I thought she was joking, but her expression didn't change. She started talking about how lonely she was, how she had money, how she wanted someone young to keep her company, and that I'd benefit from it. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I pulled my wrist away and told her I had to leave. She didn't even look mad, just smiled like she'd expected that reaction. She said she could make it worth my while. Said she'd already set something aside for me if I gave her a chance. At that point, I just needed to get out of there. I stood up, muttered something about needing air, and walked straight toward the door. I could feel her eyes on me the entire way. Outside, I started walking fast, trying to figure out how to delete every trace of her from my phone. I was halfway down the street when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate ones. When I turned around, she was there, standing at the end of the block, holding her little red purse, staring dead at me. I walked faster, trying not to look back, but I could hear her shoes tapping the pavement. Every time I turned a corner, I catch her reflection in a window or see her shadow under a streetlight. She wasn't close enough to grab me, but she wasn't far either. I ducked into a side street and waited behind a parked car, my heart pounding. After a few seconds, I saw her shuffle past the corner, still looking around. That was when I noticed something weird. She was holding her phone up, recording. I could see the red light flashing. I waited until she disappeared and bolted to my car. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock it. When I finally got inside, I locked the doors and just sat there for a minute, breathing hard. As soon as I got home, I blocked her on everything. App, number, socials, gone. But I couldn't stop thinking about her face, that weird confident smile like she'd done this before. 2 nights later, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject just said dinner. The message was short. It said, "You didn't have to run. I'm still offering." Attached was a photo. It was me at the restaurant, sitting alone, looking at my phone. I deleted it instantly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching. I checked my socials, my tagged photos, even my car mirrors every time I parked somewhere. I didn't tell anyone because it sounded too insane. Who would even believe me? About a week after that, I saw her again. Not in person, but online. A new profile popped up on the same dating app, and I recognized the photos immediately, the same blonde girl she'd used before. Different name this time. Different bio. Same pictures. I reported it, but I don't know if it did anything. Sometimes I still get random follow requests from empty accounts, all with similar names, variations of Lila, different numbers after. I ignore them, but it's messed with my head. Every time someone asks to meet up now, I make them video call first. I don't care how awkward it feels. I can't go through that again. The image of that old woman in the red dress, her perfume filling the air, that calm voice calling me by name, it's burned into my memory. The last time I checked that old restaurant's website, there was a review posted a few weeks later. It just said, "Wonderful evening with a handsome young man. I hope he's doing well." No name, but I didn't need one. I already knew who it was. The night started off normal, at least that's what I thought. He picked me up right outside my building, leaning on this shiny black car that looked way too nice for someone who said he worked in delivery. I remember thinking it was kind of impressive, like he'd cleaned it just for me. The paint was spotless, and the inside smelled like one of those expensive air fresheners from petrol stations. Everything looked perfect. We'd been talking online for a couple weeks, and he seemed funny, easy to talk to, a bit cocky, but in a harmless way. He messaged me nonstop, always asking when we finally hang out, and I gave in. He said he'd pick me up, and we'd go for a drive before getting food somewhere chill. I didn't think anything of it. The first few minutes were fine. He played some music, old R&B stuff, and we joked around. He drove kind of fast, but I figured he just liked showing off. Every time I looked over, he had this smirk on his face, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear stick. I remember thinking he looked way too confident for someone who was barely 22. About 15 minutes into the drive, we stopped at some lights, and I noticed how the car didn't sound right, like the engine was grinding or something. It wasn't loud, but it felt off. He noticed me looking and just said the car had issues. That made sense, I guess. Not everyone can afford something fancy, and maybe it was just old. We got on the motorway, and I started to relax. The windows were down, the air felt good, and the city lights were fading behind us. But then, out of nowhere, this car started following close behind. I didn't notice at first until the blue lights flashed. At first, I thought it was random. Maybe they just wanted to pass. But then the sirens came on, and the car behind us started flashing those headlights. I felt my stomach drop. He didn't pull over right away. He kept driving for another few seconds, muttering something under his breath, then finally swerved onto the side of the road. The police car pulled up behind us, lights bouncing off the mirrors, and everything got tense. I could hear my heart beating, and my hands went cold. I kept thinking maybe he was speeding or something small, but he looked scared. Not nervous, scared. He told me to just stay calm and that it was nothing major. The way he said it didn't sound convincing at all. 2 officers came up, one on his side, one on mine. A flashlight hit me right in the face and I had to squint. They asked for his license and registration, and I could feel him stiffen up. He handed them something, but I noticed his hand was shaking. They walked back to the patrol car, and for a few seconds, it was just quiet. The only sound was the engine idling and some static from his radio. I turned to him, waiting for him to say something, but he just gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept looking in the rearview mirror. Then I saw it, sweat running down his temple, his jaw twitching, his leg bouncing nonstop. He wasn't just nervous, he was panicking. The officers came back, and everything happened fast after that. One of them asked him to step out. He tried to laugh it off, but eventually opened the door. They started talking quietly, and I couldn't hear what was being said. One officer walked around to the back of the car, and the other leaned in through my side, asking me questions. How I knew him, where we were going if it was my car. I told him no, obviously, it wasn't mine. Then I heard one of them say something into his radio. The other officer's tone changed. He told me to stay in the vehicle and not move. My chest started tightening. I turned around to see what was happening, and I saw the other officer grabbing my date's arm. That's when it hit me. Something was seriously wrong. They started questioning him harder, voices raised, hands moving. He kept denying whatever they were saying, but I could see it in his face. He knew he was caught. The officer near the back of the car opened the boot and started checking inside. Then he yelled something to his partner, and the next thing I knew, one of them reached for his cuffs. And that's when he ran. He shoved one of them hard, almost knocking him over, and bolted across the road. Cars were swerving, honking, lights flashing everywhere. The officers shouted and chased after him, one of them yelling into his radio. I just sat there frozen, watching the whole thing like it wasn't real. People were slowing down to see what was happening. I could hear shouting in the distance, the sound of shoes hitting the pavement, someone yelling stop, over and over. I remember gripping the seatbelt so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't know what to do, if I should get out or just stay put. Another police car pulled up a few minutes later, and one of the officers came back to the car. He asked if I was okay, but my brain was too scrambled to answer properly. I kept asking what was going on, and he said the vehicle was reported stolen earlier that evening. The owner had already called it in. The guy I was with had taken it from a car park, apparently left running while someone went inside a shop. Everything made sense suddenly. The way he hesitated before starting the car, the smell of the air freshener masking something, the nervous look when the sirens came on. I'd been sitting in a stolen car the entire time, just clueless. They asked me to get out so they could check my ID and make sure I wasn't involved. Standing there on the side of the motorway, Wind whipping my hair and police lights flashing around me. I felt like I'd walked into someone else's nightmare. People were driving past, slowing down to stare. My date was somewhere out there in the dark, running from the police, and I was just standing by the stolen car like an idiot. After what felt like forever, one of the officers said they'd caught him a few streets down. He tried to jump over a fence and fell straight into someone's garden. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They told me I could go once they got my statement. I didn't even have a ride home anymore. They gave me a lift back, which was the most awkward drive of my life. Sitting in the back of a police car, explaining how I met a guy on an app who turned out to be driving a stolen vehicle wasn't exactly something I ever thought I'd be doing. When I finally got back, I just stood outside my building for a while, staring at nothing. He messaged me later that night from some random number. I didn't even open it, just deleted it and turned off my phone. Every time I hear a siren now, I get that same tight feeling in my chest, like I'm back on that motorway again, lights flashing, engine humming, realizing too late that the guy next to me wasn't who I thought he was. I knew something was weird the moment she walked into the cafe. Not because she looked off or anything. She actually looked great, but because she looked too comfortable, like she'd done this before. Not with me, but with someone else. There was this confidence in the way she scanned the room, smiled at the waitress, and pulled out her chair before I even stood up to help. I brushed it off, though. I'd been waiting 2 weeks to meet her, and I wasn't about to ruin it by overthinking everything. We met on an app. She had the small dog in almost every photo, and her captions were funny in a dry way that I liked. We texted every night for days, and I was actually kind of excited. I hadn't been on a date in a while, and something about her made it feel easy. Her name was Jade, and she lived a couple towns over. She sat down across from me, pulled her hair behind her ear, and smiled like she'd just gotten away with something. That should have been my first clue. The date started normal. Coffee, small talk, random stories about work and weird customers. She laughed at all my jokes, asked me personal questions, touched her hair a lot. It all felt right. Too right, maybe. I noticed she kept checking her phone under the table, though. Every time it buzzed, she glanced down and locked it again fast. Her smile would tighten for a second, and then she'd force it back. I thought maybe she just didn't want to seem rude, so I didn't say anything. Halfway through, I went to the counter to grab more drinks. That's when her phone buzzed again, but louder this time, and she didn't notice because she was scrolling on her other hand. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the name on her lock screen caught my eye. Ellie. My stomach dropped. Ellie wasn't just some random name. Ellie was my friend. Not my best friend, but someone I'd hung out with multiple times. We worked together last year, grabbed drinks a few times, played football on weekends. We still talk sometimes. I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it wasn't the same Ellie. Maybe it was her brother or something. But then I remembered something. Just 2 weeks ago, Ellie had mentioned his girlfriend in a group chat. Said she had brown hair, green eyes, and worked at a salon. The same as Jade. When I sat back down, I couldn't look at her the same. I kept staring at her face, her hands, the way she smiled at me. Everything felt fake now. She was talking about some trip she took to Italy, but my head was spinning. I asked her where she was from, just to double check, and when she said the exact same town Ellie lived in, my heart started pounding. It didn't make sense. Why would she match with me if she was already dating him? Why would she go through with meeting me? I started wondering if she even knew I knew him. Maybe she didn't recognize the connection. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. My hands were shaking when I texted Ellie. I kept it casual, just asked how things were with his girlfriend. He replied instantly, said they were great, and even sent a photo of them from the night before. My chest felt tight. Same hair, same face, same smile. Jade. I just stood there for a minute staring at my phone, feeling like an idiot. I didn't know if I should confront her or just leave. But part of me wanted to see how far she'd go. When I came back to the table, she was still scrolling on her phone, smiling at something. Probably him. I sat down and decided to act normal. I nodded along to whatever she was saying, trying to play it cool while my head was burning. She didn't seem to notice anything was off. Then her phone buzzed again, and I saw Ellie's name pop up right on her screen this time. My stomach twisted. She turned the phone face down like nothing happened. After another 10 minutes, she suggested going somewhere else. Said her place was nearby and we could hang out there, maybe watch a movie. I said sure, just to see where this was going. Her flat was small, tidy, and smelled like some expensive candle. There were photos on the wall of her and the same dog from her profile. One of them had Ellie in it. His face was half cut off in the frame, but I knew it was him. Same haircut, same stupid chain he always wore. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I didn't say a word. She went into the kitchen to grab drinks, and I walked over to the picture like I was just looking around. My hands were sweating. That was him, no doubt. My brain started spinning, trying to figure out how to play it. I could call him right then and tell him everything, but something made me freeze. I didn't know who would be mad at, him or her. She came back with 2 cans and sat on the couch next to me, acting like nothing was wrong. I could feel my pulse in my neck. Every word out of her mouth sounded fake now, like she was performing. I wanted to ask her straight up, but I couldn't. Not yet. When she went to the bathroom, I picked up her phone. I didn't even have to unlock it. Notifications filled the screen. Messages from Ellie. Stuff about missing her, about meeting up later, about not saying anything yet. My stomach dropped all over again. Not saying anything yet. About what? About me. I put the phone down exactly where it was and just sat there waiting. When she came back, I acted normal, said I had to leave soon. She didn't even ask why, just smiled and said it was fine. As soon as I got outside, I texted Ellie. I sent him a photo of the 2 of us that I'd secretly taken earlier in the cafe. His reply took a while. When it came through, it wasn't angry. It just said, I know. That was the part that really messed with me. He knew. He knew she was out with me, and he didn't care. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message for a while and blocked them both. But later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how calm he'd been. About how relaxed she acted the whole time. I started wondering if they'd planned it, if this was some kind of twisted game between them. A few days later, one of my friends mentioned that Ailey had quit his job and moved out of his flat. No one knew where he went. I checked her profile again, but she deleted it completely. Now sometimes when I'm out and I see a girl with brown hair and that same kind of dog, my stomach drops for a second. I start thinking maybe it's her again, playing the same game with someone else. I don't even use dating apps anymore. Every time I think about matching with someone new, I remember that message, just 2 words, like it was all planned from the start. He knew. I met him on a Thursday night when I was bored out of my mind and swiping just to pass time. His profile wasn't anything special, just pictures of him in hoodies, a few gym selfies, and one with a random duck, which I thought was some kind of joke. He looked normal enough. Funny messages, decent grammar, not overly flirty. We texted for a few days, and he suggested grabbing food somewhere local. I agreed mostly because he seemed harmless, and I needed something to do that weekend. When I got there, he was already waiting outside, hands shoved into his jacket pockets like he'd been standing there for a while. In person, he looked quieter, kind of awkward, like the type who laughs before finishing his own jokes. The date wasn't bad at first. He talked a lot about random stuff, like urban exploring and rescuing birds. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's got some weird hobby, right? But the way he said rescuing felt off, like he wasn't joking. Dinner was fine. The food was mid. The conversation was okay, and I was already half ready to go home when he asked if I wanted to come over and see his setup. He said it so casually that I thought maybe he meant a gaming setup or something. I hesitated, but then he told me he lived nearby. I figured, fine, I'll stay for a bit, see what he's talking about, then leave. It was still early anyway. His place was tucked behind a row of old terraced houses with tiny gardens full of overgrown weeds. The second I stepped out of the car, I noticed this weird smell. Not strong at first, just a faint damp scent, like wet towels left in a corner too long. He brushed it off, saying he'd been cleaning out the backyard earlier. Inside, the smell hit me harder. It wasn't just damp. It was this sour, earthy, animal kind of smell. The walls were yellowish, not from paint, but from years of grime. His hallway light flickered like it was on its last legs, and the floorboards creaked under every step. He kicked off his shoes and told me to do the same, which made me instantly regret wearing socks with a hole near the toe. We walked into the living room, and that's when I noticed the cages. There were a few near the windows, metal ones, stacked on top of each other. Inside them were pigeons, real ones, dozens, some missing feathers, some flapping wildly when I walked too close. Feathers and bits of food were scattered on the carpet. He acted like it was completely normal, saying something about them being rescued from the streets. I laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe this was just temporary, like he was keeping them there until he found a shelter. But he didn't look like he planned to give them away. The smell got worse the further I went in. He had newspapers laid out on the floor, covered in droppings, seed husks, and small bits of feathers that stuck to my shoes when I moved. The TV was on some random animal documentary, muted, flickering blue light across the room. He told me he also had ducks in the back garden. I thought he was joking until I heard quacking. He led me through the kitchen, and that's where it got weird. The sink was full of what looked like bird food mixed with water, and there were trays of lettuce, corn, and breadcrumbs scattered everywhere. I kept thinking he was maybe a breeder or something, but the look in his eyes when he talked about them, like he was proud of it all, was off. He opened the back door, and the smell that came out almost made me gag. The backyard looked like a small swamp. Mud everywhere, broken buckets filled with greenish water, and 3 ducks waddling around in it like they owned the place. The fence was half broken, and there were wooden crates stacked in a corner, probably more cages. He stood there smiling like he was showing off a collection. I could hear the pigeons cooing from inside, the ducks splashing around outside, and a faint buzzing sound from somewhere deeper in the yard. That's when I noticed another cage near the shed. Something was moving in there. I asked him what it was, and he said it was a special one. He walked over and opened the latch halfway, but before I could see, something hissed and flapped against the wire. It looked like a mix between a pigeon and a crow, with one eye missing. He closed it quickly and said it wasn't ready to come out yet. My stomach dropped. I wanted to leave, but he was standing right in front of the door, talking about how he'd been doing this for years, how he took care of injured ones no one else wanted. I kept nodding, pretending to listen, scanning for my shoes. Every part of me was screaming to get out, but I didn't want to make it obvious. I told him I should probably go soon because it was getting late. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stared like he was thinking about something. Then he smiled and said he'd walk me out. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed a half-closed door near the stairs. Inside, there were more cages stacked high. The sound of flapping, scratching, and faint cooing filled the room. I glanced inside for a second and saw at least 10 more birds in there, along with a few dead ones on the floor. He noticed me looking and quickly closed the door, saying something about quarantine space. My heart was racing. When I finally slipped my shoes on, he was standing too close, almost blocking the front door. His clothes smelled like the room, like dirt and feathers and something rotten. I muttered something about having to wake up early and reached for the handle. He hesitated again, staring for a moment before unlocking it slowly. I stepped outside and took a deep breath of fresh air that almost made me dizzy. He followed me to my car and waved as I got in. The ducks were still making noise behind the house, and the pigeons fluttered against the windows as I started the engine. I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. I didn't even look back when I pulled away. When I got home, I couldn't stop smelling that place. Even after showering twice, I swear I could still smell it on my skin. My hair, my clothes, everything reeked of that mix of rot and feathers. I ended up throwing away the socks I wore. The next morning, I woke up to a message from him saying he had fun and wanted to show me the new hatchlings next time. I blocked him immediately. A few hours later, I went on the app to check his profile again, and it was gone, like he deleted it completely. A week later, I passed by his area on the way to a friend's place. Curiosity made me slow down near his street. The smell hit before I even saw the house. The windows were wide open, pigeons flying in and out freely. No sign of him. Just that same flickering hallway light still on in the middle of the day. I didn't stick around to find out why. I wasn't even nervous about this one. Usually, I am before meeting someone from a dating app, running through every possible awkward thing that could happen, but with him, it felt easy. His name was Ethan. We'd been talking for a couple of weeks, and it just clicked. He wasn't weird, didn't rush anything, and actually had conversations that went beyond small talk. He seemed normal, which was rare enough that it felt like a green flag. We planned a movie night at his place. He said he'd cook and I could pick the movie. I wasn't sure about going to someone's house that soon, but he lived only 20 minutes away, and his messages made me feel safe about it. He sent the address, and I double-checked it with the photos on his profile. Same house, same front porch, same big oak tree out front. The drive there was quiet. It was late evening, just after sunset, and the streets got emptier the closer I got. His neighborhood was the kind where every house looked similar. Big lawns, trimmed hedges, and porch lights glowing in that pale yellow way that makes everything look softer. The kind of place where you'd never expect anything bad to happen. When I pulled up, this house looked exactly like the pictures he'd sent. White siding, dark roof, one light on in the living room. The blinds were half open, and I could see a warm glow coming from inside. I parked out front and sent a text saying I was there. No response. I waited a bit, watching the window, half expecting him to appear with a smile or wave me in. Nothing. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I figured he was still getting ready, maybe cooking or something, so I decided to knock. The door was unlocked. I hesitated, but the moment I stepped inside, everything seemed fine. Normal, even. The living room was neat, a couch facing a big TV, a few movie cases stacked on the coffee table, snacks laid out in bowls. Popcorn, chips, candy. It looked like he'd actually put effort into it. The TV had a streaming app open, paused on a movie selection screen, and the lights were dimmed just enough to feel cozy. It smelled faintly like butter and vanilla. I called out softly, just to let him know I was there. No answer. I checked my phone. Still nothing. I left the door cracked behind me, thinking maybe he just stepped outside for something. The silence in the house was thick. Not uncomfortable, but dense, like everything was waiting for something to happen. I sat down for a minute, looked at the snacks again, checked my messages one more time. Still no response. Then I heard it. A faint sound coming from upstairs. It took me a second to realize what it was. My ringtone. For a moment, I just sat there, confused. It was definitely my ringtone, the exact same one, echoing faintly from above. I thought maybe I'd dropped my phone outside, and someone had picked it up and brought it in, but that didn't make sense. I still had my phone in my hand. The sound continued, steady and distant, coming from upstairs. I stood up slowly, my stomach tightening. I called my own number just to confirm. Nothing. My phone didn't ring, but the one upstairs did. I took a few steps toward the staircase. Each creak of the wood sounded way too loud. The ringtone was still playing, the same melody looping over and over. Halfway up the stairs, I noticed something odd. There were no photos on the walls. Not one. No framed memories, no art, nothing. Just blank walls and that faint humming sound of a ringtone that shouldn't be there. At the top of the stairs, the sound was louder. It was coming from the first door on the left, slightly open, light leaking through the gap. I pushed it open. The room was small, plain, and dark except for a lamp by the bed. The bed itself was neatly made, everything too precise, like it hadn't been used in a while. On the nightstand beside it was a phone, my phone. The screen was lit up, my name displayed on the lock screen. Except, the photo was different. It wasn't the wallpaper I'd set. It was new. A picture of me, standing at the front door of this house, hand raised like I'd just knocked. It was taken only minutes ago. My mouth went dry. I picked up the phone, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The timestamp matched the moment I'd arrived. My stomach flipped. Someone had taken that photo. And they'd taken it from inside the house. I turned toward the door, my pulse racing so fast it hurt. Every part of me wanted to leave, but the hallway behind me suddenly felt longer than before, darker, quieter. I forced myself to move. Each step felt too slow, too deliberate, like walking through water. I didn't even bother trying to make sense of it. The unlocked door, the snacks, the silence. I just wanted out. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I grabbed my keys from the table and bolted toward the door. But it was closed now. I was sure I left it cracked open when I came in. I yanked it open anyway, ran to my car, and locked the doors the second I got inside. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. The house stayed still behind me. No movement, no sound, just that faint warm light through the blinds. I didn't look back as I drove off. When I finally got home, I went straight to my messages. His profile on the app was gone, deleted completely. All our chats, photos, everything. I tried calling the number I had been using, but it went to a generic voicemail that didn't even say his name. The photo was still on my lock screen. I tried to change it, but it wouldn't let me. Every time I tried, it froze and went back to the same image, me at the door looking out of the house. A few hours later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. When I answered, there was silence, then breathing. Not fast or heavy, just slow and close, like someone holding the phone right up to their mouth. I hung up, turned the phone off, and threw it across the room. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the phone had powered itself back on. The wallpaper had changed again. This time, it was a picture of me sleeping, taken from the end of my bed.